Back to the Metairie Bank Studios at WBOK, it's your Morning Cup with Warren Bell.
.56 degrees outside, Monday morning, March 12th. Still dark outside because we all lost an hour's sleep yesterday. And in my experience, having done early morning radio along the way many times in the last, we don't want to say how many decades, do we? Well, y'all know on Facebook already, 50 years ago, we started doing radio news in this same market, not on these same airwaves, but we did all lose an hour, and there's nothing worse than the first Monday morning for people who have to be on the air at 6 a.m., or in Quayle and Murphy's case, doing the weather at 4:30 a.m. This is always a tough day. And then on top of everything else, I stayed up past 10 p.m. But our top story this morning at 6 a.m. was, of course, the start of the 2018 Louisiana legislative regular session, which gets underway today at noon. We just got through a rather anguishing experience, sending our lawmakers up for that special session that we talked so much about prior to its beginning. So many meetings with the governor, legislative leaders, trying to make sure the GOP was more or less in a conciliatory mood, enough to resolve a problem that most experts say we really do face, that we will have to address with an intelligent approach, not only to renewing sales taxes, but to looking at things like income tax exemptions, corporate exemptions, etc. Some of the lawmakers went up yesterday. One of them is on the phone with me right now, and let me stop all the setup work and say thank you, first of all, to my neighbor, New Orleans State Senator, and my state senator, I better add, JP Morrell. Man, welcome. Thank you so much for allowing us to call you so early in the morning.
Oh, not a problem. Like you said, Mondays after the daylight savings change are the worst, and it helps to have some reason to get up this early and start trying to acclimate yourself to it.
You might as well, man. And a good, strong cup of coffee, or what is that, Earl Grey tea, the one with the heavy caffeine, you might want to do that too. I did that about an hour ago, so now we're sipping water. But JP, we talked about this, and I thought about you guys because, along the way during the special session, we interviewed people like Wesley Bishop and our other Senator Troy Carter. But for those of you on the Senate watching and waiting for something to even come to your end of the chamber during the special session, especially when we had all the anticipation that the behind-the-scenes meetings would have resolved some of what we saw still play out. First of all, from your perspective as a senator just waiting for the House to get its act together, give us your sense of what we just went through with the special session as we set up to talk about what's coming next.
Well, I think we all saw firsthand not just how inept the House was, but when you mentioned the GOP and Republicans, you saw kind of their inability to. The frustrating part as a black caucus member, more than just a senator, is that there is this effort in the House where the GOP wanted to dictate how they would allow black legislators to vote for taxes. And by that I mean you saw this whole breakdown with the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus where there was this effort to pass a variety of bills to kind of vilify Medicaid recipients. And you had many black caucus members who were highly offended by this whole idea that we're going to scarlet letter single moms. I was one of them, and we had a very hard opposition to these kind of bills. Well, it wasn't enough that the GOP had the votes to pass them without us. There were efforts by members to insert language tying all revenue to these crazy, horrific, Donald Trump-esque bills.
Right.
And where you saw the breakdown happen in the House, and it would have happened in the Senate as well, is that it wasn't enough that they refused to vote on taxes, and taxes had to pass off the backs of black people. They had to insert this offensive language saying, and by the way, we're only going to allow you to vote for a tax if you also vote to support this horrific, terrible Donald Trump 1950s vilify people that have to have some kind of assistance from the government to go through with their lives. And I mean, it was almost surreal, Warren, because none of these Republicans, you saw in all the votes, ever intended to vote on a tax, but it's almost like there was a pre-political poll tax to vote for the tax.
And what I'm in other words, with a particular focus on you guys being the Legislative Black Caucus, either you agree to this or we won't even allow the vote that we said we were prepared to take during this special session.
That was exactly it. And I think where the breakdown happened was you had, and Representative Gary Carter really summed it up very clearly. On one end, you have the Republicans saying you have to vote on Medicaid and Medicare and all these horrific things you don't agree with. On the other side, you have the governor saying, well, we want to solve this problem with the half a penny as permanent sales tax. And for many members of the Black Caucus, they said, whoa, we voted for a temporary sales tax once because a sales tax is the most regressive sales tax type you can have in as part of your budget, and it unfairly and unduly burdens those people who are lower income or are lower middle class income. So we weren't for our sales tax to begin with. We went along with it grudgingly 2 years ago. And this effort to try and solve the fiscal cliff without spreading the pain around really did not go very far. I mean, there's plenty of room to tinker with the income tax a la Stelly. There's plenty of room to attack all of these sales tax exemptions. There's a reason why major corporations don't oppose a sales tax increase. It's because they don't pay it.
It protects their cushion, correct?
Right.
Let me make sure I understand what you're saying here, because, you know, we don't mind making headlines, and I think so what you're saying is the breakdown wasn't just between Democrats and Republicans, but between the Democratic governor and his Legislative Black Caucus, because you're saying John Bel Edwards was more or less prepared to say, well, why don't we just get along, and y'all just go ahead and say yes to the half-cent extension. I was not aware of that going on behind the scenes.
Well, I think there was a little bit of coverage with Gary Carter. It didn't really go very far, where he kind of outed that already, but I'll re-out it, which is that there was a breakdown on the caucus was sandwiched between the governor who wanted to solve the problem as quickly as possible and in a way that he thought Republicans would support, and Republicans who thought that, honestly, I think there are a lot of Republicans, Warren, that go to bed each night thinking that Democrats dream of taxing people. And they just thought that they could put whatever kind of ridiculous criteria on top of the tax. And, you know, as Democrats, especially those Black Caucus members, as they wake up each day thinking about how they're going to tax people, that we'd all be for it. And the reality was the caucus had said, both verbally and in writing for the past 6 months, a sales tax was not going to be the solution, not
Exactly.
by itself. I mean, obviously, if we had some changes to the exemption law where we exposed more of these large corporations, especially out-of-state international corporations, to paying the sales tax. Honestly, Representative Kenny Havard had a bill, Warren, where just by cleaning the pennies and removing exemptions, wouldn't have to raise the sales tax at all. It was like almost the exact same amount of money as raising that half a penny or that quarter of a penny.
By addressing some of those inequities built into the current sales tax, et cetera. Scrubbing the penny, I think, is the term.
Yep, if we had scrubbed 4 pennies, 4 of the existing state, the four state pennies of sales tax, if we had scrubbed the exemptions off, it would have generated over $450 million. Which was more than what we were raising with the half penny. So
in about 5.5 hours, you and those same colleagues, and I'm going to use the word colleagues loosely because there hasn't been a lot of collegiality amongst the various factions, but here we go again. Any better prospects this time, or do you think the lawmakers are going to spend some time first focusing on those 1,000+ bills that are also awaiting your reflection and review before you even start talking again about dollars, or is that conversation about where the dollars are going to come from already a backdrop to what's happening out front?
I think the conversation is starting, Warren, but the problem is, as you know, when the state constitution is written, we can't tackle fiscal matters until after the session is over. And I think that what you're going to see during the session is kind of like the Donald Trump greatest hits. There's a lot of bills that have been filed to, you know, allow teachers to carry handguns in school, lock up people more, you know, don't allow transgender people in bathrooms. Like, basically, there'll be an effort by a lot of lawmakers to try and distract people from our utter and complete failure a week ago with social bills. Now, on the flip side, this is the last regular session before re-election, so you're going to see a lot of Democrats also filing bills that kind of speak to their base. I mean, there's a lot of bills dealing with criminal justice reform. We're one of 2 states that allow for non-unanimous jury verdicts. I got a bill dealing with that because it's just kind of nuts that we're still a state where you can get convicted for a felony of any type with less than a full jury. Only 2 states do that. It's very, very odd and very, very wrong that we're one of the 2 states that do that. So we're tackling some of those issues, but I suspect you'll have that conversation kind of in the background as white noise for the first month of session where people are trying to kind of get their heads around the fiscal cliff. And then as we get closer to the middle end of session, that conversation will take on a lot more urgency, I think, as far as what we're actually, I think you're going to do going into the next special session in late May or early June.
And we heard the governor's recommendation that lawmakers work feverishly to get all this stuff done so you could end 2 weeks early. But the reality is, with so much other legislation to look at, and this is the session where that's supposed to happen, what would your handicap be on the chances of ending 2 weeks early?
50-50. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the Senate has shown, and we will continue to show that we will. The Senate is very efficient. When we were told that this was a possibility, all the chairmen of the Senate basically put all of their committees on light speed. And whereas usually there's a week lead up, my committee, we go into a session today at noon. My committee meets today upon adjournment. That never happens. The chair of the Committee of Revenue and Fiscal Affairs, we're jumping into the deep end of the pool immediately because the goal is obviously, because we just wasted taxpayer money, to have a session as quickly as possible to not do that again. So I've also got a bill, Warren, constitutional amendment. Part of the reason why we keep having all these special sessions is that we're only allowed to consider fiscal matters on odd years. I've got a bill that changes the Constitution that says that during regular sessions we can file 5 fiscal bills, like during fiscal sessions we can file 5 non-fiscal bills. I'm going to try and put this up there because had we had something like this in place, we would have saved ourselves probably 4 or 5 special sessions.
And we would not have been kicking the can. Well, we would like to think that without that additional set of handcuffs, we might not have been kicking the can so long as we have done and apparently continue to do.
That is correct. I mean, the thing is that if legislators were held to account and knew that during these regular session years they could start to address things like exemptions and credits and truly get in the weeds, they wouldn't have that excuse to say, well, we'll tackle that next year. Let's pass a temporary sales tax for 2 years, for a year, because, we'll tackle it. It's like, no, let's tackle it now. And if we're not going to tackle it now, if we don't have the fortitude to do it, let's figure out another solution, because that's the problem. The problem is a lot of legislators, especially the newer ones, their default mode is what can I avoid voting on so that I can get reelected? And that's not the way government works or functions.
I'm fascinated by your attempt to introduce that constitutional amendment. Not sure how much traction you're going to get, but we need to remind people that would then require a statewide vote by the population to say yes to such an idea, right?
That is correct. It will have to get past my colleagues and then past the state. But I actually have less concern with. I think citizens are smarter than legislators. If I can get it to the state, that we'd be in good shape. The problem is getting it past the legislature because big corporations don't like having to hire lobbyists every year, so they're the biggest opposition to doing something like that, because if we could fix the problem, they would have to hire their well-paid lobbyists for every year instead of every other year.
Because they understand better than apparently some of your counterparts that fixing the problem is going to have an impact on them and the joyride they get from the state of Louisiana year after year.
That is correct.
So what's the prospects? Now, let me ask you for something really crazy. So we've had so many people talk about how long it's been since we've had a full-fledged constitutional review. What's the prospects of that happening anytime soon?
I think it's very, very low. Those same interest groups that enjoy all those credits, the same groups that prefer the current structure of government, they will spend a tremendous amount of money not letting it happen. But more importantly, for those of us who watch these kind of bills, you have to be very careful that when you craft this constitutional convention in that you make sure real people are on the convention
Yes.
and not paid people. Because the challenge is that when you have a convention, the most important thing is the delegate process, and that you have a delegate process that kind of resembles a traditional election. What's going to happen is that you're going to have a tremendous amount of corporate and dark money be spent to elect delegates who will craft a constitution that is worse than the one we have. So as we look at these, there's a variety. I think there's dozens of bills dealing with it. But if you're going to have a convention, you have to make sure the delegate process in each bill allows for a fair, public, and non-money-driven process on how you pick delegates. Because, I mean, you think this Constitution is bad, it could be way worse. It could be way worse.
Something sober to contemplate before we just cavalierly say what we need is a new Constitution.
That is correct.
Be careful what you ask for, right, JP?
That's right.
One last question. With all the doom and gloom, with all the low prospects we seem to be handicapping for things, any optimism about this session? Be it for something finally getting tackled, or what? What? Give us something good to end on.
When it comes to the finances, that's always going to be difficult. But what I will say is, with Governor Edwards, you've had tremendous growth and work on criminal justice reform. And obviously, you know, when you talk about justice reform in the state of Louisiana, the people that are disproportionately affected by things like draconian marijuana laws or non-unanimous juries are African Americans. And you've really seen this governor kind of tackle that issue head on to push for true, lasting criminal justice reform to bring parity to the justice system so that people that look like you and I don't spend a lot of time in jail, while people who don't look like you and I tend to always find a way to get out of jail.
Senator JP Morrell, thank you so very much. Keep fighting the fight, man. Hopefully we'll get an update from you maybe in a few weeks when the Senate finally has something to act upon, because most stuff still starts at the House, right? Or is that strictly the financial thing?
A big chunk of stuff still starts at the House.
There are some things, however, during the regular session that you guys can get started on and then send over to the House for review? Am I understanding that? Good. We appreciate your time, as always, sir. That is State Senator JP Morrell. Can we get a little music, Lee, as we allow Ms. Quaylen Murphy to tell us the weather forecast? JP, once again, thank you. Happy Monday, sir.
Happy Monday.